to achieve the profits, we have to set some goals. Now, these goals should be interrelated to the activities of the business. Foresight means forecasting the future events. Planning is a primary function. It is a managerial function. So, without any plan, you cannot have a business organization. Based on our evaluation and based on our forecasting, we have to take a decision, that is sound judgment. Hello everyone, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence. In continuation of my session on the 4th chapter of planning for the second PUC Business Studies, in this session, I will be discussing about the features of planning and the limitations of planning. So, this is chapter 4, session 2. Now, let us look into what are the features of planning. So, in my previous session, I had given you introduction of the word plan, what is the meaning of planning, and I also introduced you to the why planning is very important. Now, in this session, we will be looking into the features of planning or what is the nature of planning. So, if you can see here, planning focuses on achieving the objectives. As you all know, the planning is the most important function of management, and all business organizations are formed for the basic purpose or with an objective. So, now based on the objective of the business, we have to prepare the plans. So, that is why we say that planning focuses on achieving the objectives. So, objectives can be called the goals or targets. So, it may be the goal or the target. So, whatever it is, whatever you call, so it is the objective of the organization. So, once you are clear about what is the objective of the organization, then you go ahead with your plans. So, organizations are set up with a general purpose in view. So, they will be set up with a general purpose in view. It may be like having a profit-oriented organization, or you want to make huge profits out of the business. So, that is the general purpose of the organization. Now, if you want to have profits, then what are the goals? Then next step is specific goals are set out in the plans along with the activities to be undertaken to achieve the goals. So, we know that the profit is the main objective of any business organization. Now, to achieve the profits, we have to set some goals. Now, these goals should be interrelated to the activities of the business. Now, specific goals are set out in the plans along with the activities to be undertaken to achieve the goals. So, when you have the goals in mind and you also know what is your goal, then you just interrelate the activities. So, what are the activities you need to achieve the goals? Then, the next step will be when you achieve these goals, in the long run, you will be achieving the objectives of the organization. Then, we also know that planning has no meaning unless it contributes to the achievement of predetermined organizational goals. So, planning will have no meaning. So, even how much ever you plan, but if it does not attain the organizational objectives, it is worthless. So, we need to see that the planning is related to the objectives, and based on the objectives you set specific goals, and based on the goals you plan your business activities. So, when all these synchronize with each other, only then we can attain the organizational objectives. Next, the features of planning. So, we all know that planning is the first function of management, then organizing, then leading, then controlling. So, planning is the primary function of management, or it is also the first function. So, based on this planning, all other activities are planned. So, all other managerial functions are performed within the framework of the plans drawn. So, planning provides the basis of all other functions. So, we should know that the planning is the framework. So, planning is the framework means, so in the plans we will be having specific goals, and in the goals we will be having specific activities to achieve the goals, and based on this plan only the entire framework of the organization will be running. So, planning is a primary function, it is a managerial function. So, without any plan you cannot have a business organization. So, a business organization which is run on plans will work very well. So, it will attain the organizational objectives in the long run. So, planning is a primary function of management. So, planning is correlated to organizing, it is correlated to leading, it is correlated to controlling. So, everything for all the activities of management, planning provides the base. Now, the next feature of planning is pervasive. So, why we call planning is pervasive? So, we can see here, so the various aspects of the organization. So, the time is the main factor here, and any aspect of the organization we need to plan, whether it is the top level, middle level or the lower level. Now, planning is required at all levels of management as well as in all departments, and it is not an exclusive function of the top management. So, we all understand that planning is the activity of the top management. Yes, planning is the activity of the top management, but top management will formulate plans for the entire organization, and based on the plans of the top management, the middle level and the lower level managements will have their own set of plans. So, they have to formulate their plans so that the top level plan of the management is executed. So, we should know that planning is required at all levels of management and in all departments. So, whether it is the production department, the HR department or the marketing department, accounts department, finance department or any department. So, we should understand that planning is very, very essential. So, planning is essential at all departments and it is not an exclusive function of the top management only. But the scope of planning is different at different levels. So, what is the scope of planning? So, for each department, after the top management formulates the plans, each department will have its own plans in execution. So, how that plan is relevant to each department, based on that, they will be having their own plans. The scope of their plan will be limited only to that particular department only. So, that for each department, when each department formulates its own plans and then executes the job, then we can see that the top level management, whatever they have planned, that will be executed. Then we should also understand that it is not an exclusive function of top management of any particular department. So, it is not an exclusive function of the top management. Then next feature of planning is continuous. You can see here the steps which we have planned. So, till here we have planned and after that again we have to keep on planning. So, if you don't have any plans, we cannot continue with the business. So, planning is continuous. So, why we call planning is continuous? Because the planning is worked out for a specific period of time. So, we have to have time-based plans. So, it may be plan for a year or planning for a month, planning for a week or planning for a day. So, within the time framework of the plans, we have to see that plans are executed. So, planning thus involves thorough examination and evaluation of each alternative and choosing the most appropriate one. So, plans are prepared for a specific period and when you are preparing the plan, you have to thoroughly examine and we have to evaluate each alternative. So what is the alternative here? What are the various alternatives? So we have to evaluate and choose the most appropriate alternative. And then once a plan is implemented, then again you draw up a new plan. So first you draw a plan for a year, and then you cut it down to 1 month, and then 1 week, and then 1 day and 1 hour. So in this way you will be seeing that in the long run the yearly plans will be carried out. So once the yearly annual plans are implemented, then again you have to plan for the next year. So this is a continuous process. So once the plans which are drawn are implemented, then you have to draw new plans so that the organizational activities does not come to a standstill and activities keeps on moving. Then the next feature of planning is a mental exercise. Here we are exerting our brain muscles. So planning is something which goes on in the brain. If you can see here, so all the calculations which are going on relating to plan, it is in the mind of the person. So it is an intellectual activity. So it requires application of the mind involving foresight. That is, whenever you plan, you have to forecast. Suppose you want to have a plan of selling so many units. So 1 lakh units of a product. Then you have to forecast the sales of that product. So what will be the sales of the product for the next year? So based on the sales forecast, you can plan. So we need to have foresight. Foresight means forecasting the future events. Then intelligent imagination. So you need to imagine things. So how the things will be in the next year. So what will be the sales situation, or what will be the situation in the economy, how favorable it will be for our product. So all these things we have to imagine, and then we have to formulate the plans. And then we have to have sound judgment. Sound judgment means based on our evaluation and based on our forecasting, we have to take a decision. That is sound judgment. So it is all the calculations of the mind. So that is why we call planning as a mental exercise. So it requires logical and systematic thinking. So you need to think logically and systematically rather than guesswork or wishful thinking. So there is no room for guesswork in planning. So you cannot guess anything or you cannot wish for anything. Whenever you have a plan, you need to see that there is a proper forecasting. So when you forecast things, you need to have a proper collection of data to forecast the sales for the next year or the next 5 years. So everything should be based on accurate data, and then after that you have to assume that all the factors will be favorable. Only then you can have a proper plan which will be a sound judgment. We have just discussed the features of planning. Now next we look into the limitations of planning. So as you all know, any concept, whether it is planning or anything, so everything will have its own limitations. Now let us look into what are the limitations of planning. In this planning, first limitation is it leads to rigidity. Now what do you mean by rigidity? So we'll just see what is given here. In an organization, a well-defined plan drawn up with specific goals to be achieved within a specific time frame. Okay, so a well-defined plan, what does it tell us? It will tell us the specific goals and the specific time frame. So what are the goals? What is the time frame? So if it is a plan for a day, so what is the production target and what is the time within which you have to achieve the target? So that will be laid out in the plans. Then these plans then decide the future course of action. So they will be deciding the future course of action, and the manager may not be in a position to change it. So in the beginning of the day, you will be planning for a production of 500 units for the day. But then you will not know what will happen in that day. Maybe the machinery breakdown, or the labor may not turn up, or there may be something, or the machinery may be under repair. So there may be some unforeseen circumstances which will not allow the production for that day. So what will happen? The plans have to be changed, and this has to be under the discretion of the manager. So when you lay down a plan, it becomes rigid. So when you are laying the plan here, so this person is just seeing the target, or if you are setting a very high target for the employee to achieve, so he may be just taken aback by the target which is set for him. So we have to see that plan should be flexible, and the manager should be able to use his own discretion whenever circumstances are against the implementation of the plan, or when circumstances have changed, plans may not turn out to be in the organization's interest. So the manager should be able to draw up another plan if there are circumstances which are going against the previous plan. So planning leads to rigidity. So you are just dictating the terms to the employees, and they have to carry out those orders. So it leads to rigidity. Then next limitation of planning is planning may not work in a dynamic environment. So in my previous sessions, I had discussed about the business environment. So business environment is dynamic in nature. So why we call business environment as dynamic in nature? Because there are so many factors which have an impact on the business. So it may be the economic factors, it may be the social factors, it may be the political factors, or it may be the legal factors which will have an impact on the business. So all these factors keep on changing in the business environment, and the business environment has to cope up with these changes. So if it does not suit itself, or if it does not adapt itself to the latest changed environment, then it will be losing out the race. So all the business should study the environment which is always changing. So we say that planning may not work in a dynamic environment. Now we all know that when business environment is dynamic, nothing is constant. So everything keeps on changing. For example, the customer's tastes and preferences, fashions, trends, taste. So everything keeps on changing. So based on the changing preferences of the customers, so you have to update your products. So the organization has to constantly adapt itself to the changes. So whatever are the changes, it has to adapt itself. Now, when we speaking about the limitation, we say that planning cannot foresee everything. So if he does not foresee all these changes, then there may be obstacles in effective planning. So if a good planner is not able to just forecast all these changes in the environment, then it may be an obstacle for effective planning. So we should know that planning may not work in a dynamic environment. So every minute the fashion keeps on changing, and we have to upgrade our products based on the customer's preferences. Only then we can remain in business. So otherwise we will be losing out to our competitors. Then the next limitation of planning is planning reduces creativity. If you can see here how the human brain is, so this part is very, very creative. Creative means each one has his own idea of a scenery. Suppose you ask one person to draw a scenery, so he may have his own idea of a scenery, another person may have his own idea of scenery. So that is creativity. So if you want one person to dance, his style of dance will be different from another person's dance. Similarly, thinking, singing, so all these things are creativity. It depends on the person's creativity, how creative he is or how skillful he is in that particular art. Now, here we say that planning reduces creativity. So, when you are planning for the organization, you are, in other words, killing the creativity of the people. How? Let us just look into this matter. So, planning is an activity which is done by the top management. So, this we all know, top management lays down the plans for the entire organization, and usually the rest of the members just implement these plans. So, all other departments, divisions, everybody, they just implement these plans, and based on that plans laid down by the top management, the middle and the lower level management will be having their own plan of action. So, what will happen is, so we don't have any creative thinking. So, here you can see half of the brain, this is the planned one. So, here everything is based on plan. So, there is no room for creativity. But this part of the brain where there is no plan, so you can be as creative as possible. That's what the picture is trying to tell us. So, when you lay down the plans for the entire organization, they will be thinking on those lines only, and they will not have any creativity or innovative ideas. They may forced to think on the plans laid down before them. So, the middle management and other decision makers are neither allowed to deviate from the plans, nor are they permitted to act on their own. So, the middle level management and the lower level of management, they are neither allowed to deviate. So, whatever a plan is given to them, it is their job to execute those plans, and they don't have any permission to act on their own. So, this is another limitation of planning. Now, the next limitation of planning is it involves huge cost. So, why we say planning huge is involving huge cost? See, first thing is planning is a mental exercise. So, we need not do anything, we have to just think. But then even for thinking, why we say that it involves huge cost? Let us look here. So, when plans are drawn up, huge costs are involved in their formulation. So, why huge costs are involved? We will just check. So, detailed plans require scientific calculations to ascertain facts and figures. So, whenever you are drawing up a plan, you need scientific calculations. So, when there are scientific calculations, you need to have proper data. Now, this data has to be collected from the market. From the market research, whatever you are collecting the data, so that has to be done, put into statistical analysis, and then you get the result, and based on those results only, you will be forecasting your business plans. Now, all this involves lot of money. Then, next one is whenever you are planning, the top management will be meeting, and whatever the meeting expenses, so wherever there is meeting, there is eating also, and you have to arrange for all these things. So, it involves lot of expenses, and that is why we say that planning involves huge cost, because plan is always based on data which is collected. So, the cost incurred sometimes may not justify the benefits derived from the plans. So, whatever cost you are incurring on the planning portion, it may not equate to the benefit you are getting from those plans, or the profit which you have got from implementation of the plans may not cover up the entire cost of planning. So, we say that the planning involves huge cost. Next limitation of planning is a time consuming process. If you can see here, the clock is there and the employees are running. So, why they say that? Because planning is a time consuming process, because we need a lot of time to collect the data, we need lot of time to classify, analyze, study the data, and then give our projections. So, all this is a very, very time consuming process. So, sometimes plans to be drawn up take so much of time that there is not left time for implementation. So, for collection of data, analysis and studying the plans, because it consumes lot of time, there will be no time for implementation. So, this is one of the limitations of planning. Now, the next limitation of planning is planning does not guarantee success. Yes. So we have all been telling that because of planning, we can be able to achieve the organizational goals. So most of us, we just think that once you have a plan, then it is easy to achieve the organizational goals. But then planning does not guarantee success. Now, why planning does not guarantee success? Let us look here. The success of an enterprise is possible only when plans are properly drawn up and implemented. So, when an organization is successful, it is successful when the plan is good. When the plan is good and it is properly implemented, only then we can achieve success. But then, if the plans are wrong, and then if it is not implemented, or if it is not implemented in the way it has been thought of, then we cannot have success in the organization. So, any plan needs to be translated into action. So, only when you translate the plan into action, only then it becomes a success. Otherwise, it becomes meaningless or it may lead to failure. So, these are the limitations of planning. So, planning does not guarantee success. So, we should not come to the conclusion that once we have planned for the business, the success is ours. So, we cannot guarantee success just because we have drawn up the plan, because planning has to be implemented properly. The implementation part is as important as the planning part, and both have to be given ample attention. So, otherwise it becomes a futile exercise. So, planning does not guarantee success. So, these are the limitations of planning. So, we should understand that planning does not ensure success. So, until and unless it is a very good plan and it is properly implemented, only then we can think of success in the business. Now, next, if you can see the picture here, so these are the plans which are not properly implemented. So, if the plans are not properly implemented, then you can see that there is a downfall then. So, managers have a tendency to rely on previously tried and tested successful plans. So, as you all know that planning is a time-consuming process. So, what the managers of the business do? So, they will just follow the time-tested. So, whatever plan was working 2 years back or previously, so they try to implement those plans. Now, these plans may have worked previously, but now in the changing business environment, they may not work again. So, it is not always true that just because a plan has worked before, it will work again. So, we should understand that the plans have to be drawn for any new business environment because it is dynamic in nature. Then, besides, there are so many unknown factors to be considered. So, we should see that what are the various contingencies which come up in the implementation of the plan, and all these have to be considered. This kind of complacency and false sense, so it makes planning a useless exercise. So, we should know that whenever we make a plan, it should be after ensuring that you have proper logical and systematic thinking. Otherwise, it will be a useless exercise. Planning is to be used with caution. So, you have to use it with caution. And why? Because it provides the base for all future courses of action. In this session, we have discussed the features of planning and the limitations of planning. Hope you have all understood the basic features and the limitations. Thank you.